Hi, welcome to today's edition of Monsterology, and today we're going to look at this idea of the hungry ghost, which is very common in Asian cultures. It stems originally from a Sanskrit word preta, and so in Hinduism there's this idea of a creature that basically was once a human being, and because of your bad karma, you essentially get reincarnated into a realm of hell where you suffer because you're incredibly hungry and you need to eat and your belly is huge and you need to fill it, but you basically you can't get access to food. Or in some traditions, there'll be like the creature will have a pinhole mouth or no mouth at all. It's sort of like the Greek idea of Tantalus. And this then emerges in Buddhism as well, and then transplants to East Asia. So you'll see the Hungry Ghost Festival is very common in China. There's a hungry ghost in most Asian countries. You probably have seen some version of it in Hayao Miyazaki films in Japan. And so today we're going to look at this idea of the hungry ghost, learn a little bit about the culture, but we're basically working on an image that will be meaningful. It'll be a narrative image that tries to encapsulate some of these ideas of the hungry ghost. So let's see what we can do.
One of the most famous visual representations of the hungry ghosts is a giant Japanese hand scroll called Gakizoshi. And this is from the 12th century, and it's like in the National Museum in Tokyo, and it gave us some images that have been retained in the pictorial tradition. What you're seeing here is a representation of the ghosts have to go and actually eat the feces of human beings. It's pretty disgusting, but they're at a latrine where people are taking a squat, and they basically are reduced to eating everything disgusting. So I guess this is a kind of a warning: keep good karma, or you're going to end up eating people's excrement. So basically, as usual, I start out by drawing. And I want to develop some of these ideas in a sketch. And here I'm basically whittling my own pencil, which I find very therapeutic and kind of relaxing to do. Obviously, be careful. But sometimes what does much better is just a pencil sharpener. And so my advice to you is to really spend the money and get a German-made precision pencil sharpener, because they are no joke. The Germans, they get things sort of technically very well, especially in the area of machinery. And I start sketching, and I'm trying to use some of that imagery from the Gakizoshi Japanese scroll, and I looked at a whole bunch of other Chinese sources and some Indian representations of the preta or hungry ghost, and I'm basically doing a kind of amalgamation, doing a kind of character design based on these creatures that I saw in the pictorial traditions. So I'm trying to do like a pinhole mouth, the sort of long hair of the ascetic, the extended belly of the starving, hungry, tortured soul. And I should mention that the word hungry ghost, comes from this Sanskrit word preta. And preta just means a deceased or dead person, or someone who's gone on. And what's interesting about the hungry ghost as a monster is that it reminds you that they are, not just evil and mean you harm, but they're really just wounded, suffering former human beings. So they've been emotionally injured. It's a result of their own bad karma, their own greed and avarice and gluttony. But still, I think there is this tradition in monsterology of pure evil monsters, but also just creatures that should be pitied because they've, sinned greatly or had misfortune, and it's turned them into something less than human. And that's really a theme in the sort of hungry ghost literature and in the hungry ghost imagery. We have all kinds of examples of this, like Frankenstein's a great example. The creature is horrifying and awful, but really he was made so by neglect and you see more recent versions of it, in the recent film The Joker, it's sort of the origin story of a monster, and yet you see that it's somebody who ends up monstrous, but if you look at the origin story carefully, you'll see that they themselves are deeply wounded, broken by their experiences as well. So that it just, I always like to see something a bit more philosophically complex in these monster narratives and stories. And here in Buddhism and Hinduism, you find, I think, a sophisticated version of the monsters. All right. One of the things that I got really excited about was the idea that how could the hungry monsters be helped? How could they be healed? And to the rescue comes the female Buddha of compassion, Guan Yin. And there's a number of stories and legends of Guan Yin who helps, the hungry ghosts in order to get out of hell or basically like improve their karma. I'm just using basically a 2B pencil here and trying to sketch the thing without thinking too much about the details or getting everything right. I'm trying to get the mood of it correct, and then I feel like I can come back later and refine things. I can basically just rub it out with a kneaded eraser and try to get things more anatomically correct, or get the sort of angle just right. But at the first sort of attempt, the raw drawing, I really just want to get the emotional feeling of the thing. And these things are disgusting and unpleasant. So if you're looking at it and feeling like that's kind of disturbing, then mission accomplished. That's basically the goal of this drawing. And what I then did is I thought, well, I'll do some drawings of Guan Yin. And Guan Yin is this very famous female Buddha, hugely famous in East Asia, like in China. It emerges out of the earlier Hindu or Indian Buddhist tradition, but at that point, the Buddha of compassion is called Avalokiteshvara. And Avalokiteshvara is described sort of in detail in the Lotus Sutra. Here I'm sketching Guan Yin, so you'll probably recognize this female Buddha. There's beautiful statues of it all over Asia, and a lot of people have these even after World War II. There was a lot of Asian decorative art that made its way into the West, and so you've probably seen some version of this. She's floating on a cloud here, and what you can see her doing is actually dropping food to the hungry ghosts in hell. And so that's ultimately what I decided would be the image. So from here on out, I'm basically just trying to realize that imagery. Oh, let me just quickly let you know what I'm doing here is this style where I mix a little bit of color with this matte, Liquitex matte extender or matte medium, and then I roll it on. And I've never done this before. I basically just left the pencil drawing and thought, well, what if I just roll a light wash of this stuff over the top? And it worked because I'm trying to get that feeling of a scroll or an ancient Chinese painting. So here the tones and the contrasts are light and delicate rather than sort of dramatic and sort of like intense colors. The colors are sort of all washed out. You'll see this frequently in Chinese art, and it's hard to get this to look that way. I'm just basically laying in a very light wash of acrylic now over the top of this to see, and when I get that done, I'm actually going to roll over it again, which is a risky venture because then I'd risk losing all of the details of the drawing underneath, but it is effective in giving this more antique look. Anyway, Guan Yin, as I say, is very famous from the Lotus Sutra, which is probably the most famous image or sutra in Buddhism. And in the stories of later sutras, Guan Yin enters hell, feeds the ghosts, and then leads them to rebirth in a better place. And so I liked this idea that even though they're monsters, there's also there's redemption. There's a way in which you can basically, undo your fate, but it oftentimes requires the compassion of others. So it's a classic Buddhist story of, you should improve your empathy to such a high level that you can even love the unlovable. So here I'm basically rolling over again the image, and now I'm very pleased with how this is turning out, because it's got the color. The colors are muted, and the palette here is all pretty controlled. And by laying over that sort of tan color, dun colored wash, it really gives it that antique look, and it softens some of the stronger contrasts. And so I'm so pleased with this that I may do this more in the future. Yeah, I just feel like that is a great look. It's a great look, and I feel lucky to have discovered this technique. So I encourage you to do this kind of thing. Really take chances, and you have to learn the hard way what the ratio is of pigment to water. But you can only do that by experimenting. So maybe do small drawings and then try this kind of thing over the top to see if it works. And maybe just a few more words then about hungry ghosts as they play into the larger cultures of Asia. In China, there's a festival called the Hungry Ghost Festival every year, and what's fun about this is they'll burn effigies of luxury items, like they'll sort of create cutout or fake Gucci bags or Louis Vuitton stuff, and then they'll burn it at the Hungry Ghost Festival. And this is to symbolize letting go of materialism. So you're basically supposed to improve your karma by letting go of material things. But I think it's funny that it's just symbolic rather than really letting go of your Louis Vuitton bag. So I think that's pretty humorous. Anyway, this is the final drawing. I am fairly pleased with it. I like the way it turned out in terms of the design, the idea, and the execution. If you want to learn more about Buddhism, check out my book, Buddha for Beginners. It's an illustrated guide to Buddhism and mostly the philosophy of Buddhism. And so that's available at all bookstores and Amazon and wherever you can buy books online. I think that wraps up this edition of Monsterology, and I thank you guys for watching, and hopefully it was educational and informative. If you enjoyed this video, please give the thumbs up and share with your friends so I can continue making them. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell. And be sure to check out my other videos as well. Thanks for watching.